Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is May 8th, 2024, and I have got another fantastic author for you today. This woman I actually met in a memoir writing group here in Germany. She's another expat from Brazil this time, and we have been collaborating with the group to write our respective memoirs. And today we're going to talk to her about hers. Now, she has 2 books in publication already, and you're going to hear all about them. Now, I've also got a lot of information about things that are going on behind the scenes right now with Burkhart Books and Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart and Book Banter Magazine. So much is going on, but I'm going to wait and tell you all about that after this interview, because right now we need to welcome Kezia Kos. And normally the way that I start these interviews is I just have my guest tell our listeners who you are and what you have written.
My name is Kezia Kos, and I'm a Brazilian writer here living in Germany. I have a bachelor in translation in English and French, a postgrad specialization in psychoanalysis. While doing my research and also through life, I realized that there were very little stories about the golden child. When we're talking about family neurosis, we have a specific constellation of the narcissistic parent, the flying monkey who always helps the narcissistic parent, the black sheep, and the golden child. Everybody writes about the black sheep because they're very interesting. Everybody wants to know how they cut off their family and did everything. But there are very few narratives about the golden child, the one that stays, the one that pays the price of staying under the thumb of the narcissistic parent. And that's the story I wrote, how I got out of this narcissistic cycle of the family and everybody putting their opinions into your life. And if I can do it, I believe that other people who are in the same situation can do that too.
That's one thing that I was really fascinated about with your story, because I didn't study psychology per se, but I have a degree in forensic criminology and I specialized in profiling. So I did study psychology, but more in the criminal aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about these different personality types and how they work within a family dynamic is really interesting to me. So I was really looking forward to getting into this with you.
Okay. That's going to be an interesting conversation because I didn't know even the names of it until I started watching many videos during my therapy sessions and also indicated by my therapist of Dr. Ramani. Dr. Ramani is a narcissistic specialist in the US, and she makes TED Talks and she makes trainings for survivors of narcissistic parents or survivors of people with narcissistic tendencies. And it was eye-opening watching any of her videos because she was describing my life. Every single point that she described of the interactions between the narcissistic person and the people around them, she was describing the everyday life in my house. And then I went into this spiral of reading books and looking into other psychotherapists or other people that were online saying, hey, these people cannot help themselves. And the best way for you to heal is to walk away or to do a family cutoff, or to be a greystone, or find a way of strengthening your core of your personality in a way that whatever they throw at you cannot move you.
So how old were you when you had this revelation about your family dynamic?
Oh, I always wanted to live abroad, which is a strange thing for a Brazilian girl because we are very family centered. And when I was 12 years old, I went to my dad and said, I want to live abroad. I said, why? Because you're not going with my money. He said, okay, I'm going to figure it out. And then my entire life, I worked and I studied towards that goal. And nobody in my family understood because we were born and bred to get married, have children, and pop babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out of that norm. And I was the oldest child. And nobody really understood that. But as I was first living abroad, I was introduced to different families with different dynamics. And I was looking around. This is very familiar, but there's something strange here because there is no games of power between the people in the family. And then at some point, I had to come back and I was introduced to the games of power again. And I said, oh, that's what is different. And I never fit in again back in Brazilian society. So the moment I came back, I realized that I couldn't live under the thumb of my parents anymore, specifically my mother. And then that created a roller coaster of difficulties and disagreements between me and her that evolved into a full cutoff that I had to go to therapy urgently because I said, I need help because I cannot do this alone. And in therapy, we studied that and then we literally made a plan to rescue myself. The fact that I had to rebuild my idea of what family is, what I was, and what my family was. That's when I said, okay, this is interesting because you were born into a family, but you don't necessarily need to be subjugated to it. You're not your father's keeper or your brother's keeper. At some point, if this respect is not being served, you have to be brave enough to stand up off the table and walk away.
Is going to therapy something that's openly accepted in Brazil, or does it have stigma to it? Because there's a lot of places that there's stigma whenever you tell people you go to therapy.
Now you open a very interesting can of worms. Because in Brazil, people have a very specific idea of what Brazil is, because everybody only knows samba, people dancing naked in carnival, and Pelé. And that's the whole macro idea of Brazil. They don't understand that we are very culturally diverse. Every state, we have a different basis of culture. We have different music, different food, different accents. And we are traditionally a very family-centered society. We are very conservative, maybe even more than in America, especially in the big or small centers. If you have a very strong religious influence, people are going to be very conservative, regardless of their relationships and their behavior outside of church. Their thinking is very conservative. So it creates a certain cognitive dissonance between what is preached and what is done. And when we talk about therapy, especially in very Christian-centered words, and especially Christian-centered families, therapy is not something that is not even spoken about, because you don't do therapy because you don't trust medicine, because the medicine is from the devil. And you pray the crazy away. And that's literally a sentence that I heard being told to me. So when I told everybody in my family that I was going to therapy, they would say, why? You're okay. It's like, no, I'm not okay. I'm being depressed. I haven't left my bed for 6 months. I need help. Oh, no, you're fine. And after I got better and I went to my family and said, you need therapy, you need therapy, you need therapy. They said, we're fine. We have always been like that. And if we have any problems, we're going to pray the crazy away. And that's something that hurts so much because I said, guys, the time of prayer was 10 years ago. Now is the time of action. So you cannot ignore the problem. God is not a God of only prayer. You have to have actions. And that's why he gave wisdom to men to create medicine. One of my uncle's aunties could come over and put my mom in the car and bring her to a doctor. And they said, your mom is fine. We're just going to go over there to have a cake with her, have coffee, and walk away.
Okay.
And she's going to be fine. And I said, that's unacceptable. My mom needs therapy. And that's what broke my heart.
Yeah. That you're asking for help for your mother and nobody's willing to give it.
Because their excuse is that has always been like that. And I said, yeah, she needs therapy. She needs a doctor. She needs to be treated. But they said, she has always been like that. Live and let die. And I couldn't accept it. And that's why I wrote the book.
Well, and a lot of times whenever you have a family that is so ingrained in their psychosis, it usually doesn't start with them. It starts
No.
further back.
Yes, you're correct.
Do you
So
do you have any idea how far back it actually began for your family?
in my family, I researched it all the way to my grandparents, but I know the signs of aggression came from before that. But that's why it's a work of fiction.
Hmm.
I have no proof. There are no records. I only have what has been told over and over between different people with different versions. And the one that I wrote is the one that I remember. I know that there were psychotic and psychopathic behaviors all the way from my great grandfather. But in the beginning of the 20th century, being an aggressive bastard was totally acceptable in the countryside of Brazil. But today is unacceptable. So you have to understand that the cultural differences are very strong, but it doesn't make the behavior acceptable. It's just that it was a different time.
So how long did it take before you actually made the move to Europe?
I decided I was going to move when I was 12, but the first time I came to Europe, I actually came when I was 23. And then I pinged around. I lived in Italy, in Ireland, here in Germany. Then I lived in the Middle East and then went to Brazil, lived like 2 or 3 years. And then my company transferred me to Germany, and I have been here in Germany for 8 years. So I haven't fully lived in Brazil since I was 23. It's been a while.
Whenever you finally moved away from your family and you had that distance, was there a point that you actually had more clarity just how toxic your environment had been because you had that comparison of being away?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was really when we had what I call the Great Schism of 2008,
Hmm.
because that was the first time that my mom destroyed my psyche. Because my mom, while I was living in Dubai, she wrote that she was going to commit suicide because she had committed some mistakes and she couldn't live with them. Now imagine me living in Dubai. I received that email out of nowhere and I totally panicked. I packed my things, I abandoned my job and took the first flight in the following morning to Brazil, thinking that I was coming back to a funeral.
Wow.
And when I arrived home, just for you to have an idea, the flight from Dubai to Sao Paulo are 15 hours.
Hmm.
It's 3 hours pre-boarding and 3 hours post-boarding. So it's around maybe 24 hours
Oof.
awake.
Yeah.
And I haven't slept the day before from the moment I received the email. So I was awake around 48 hours by the time I landed in Brazil and I came home. And when I arrived at home, and my mom was standing at the door, I said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Mom, you wrote to me you're committing suicide. Of course I'm coming over. You don't write something like that to your only daughter and don't expect a reaction. So go back." So no, I'm not coming back. I want an explanation. And that's when the veil of all the lies and all the untruth and literally my innocence was destroyed because everything that she had hidden from me for the last 10 years, she couldn't hide anymore. And I describe it in very big detail in the book. So if you ever have the chance of reading it, and that's where we go to the different family behaviors because I had been the golden child until that moment.
Hmm.
That was the first time I said no to my mom. She was always harsh with my brother and she was always critical of him. But I was always the golden child. I was always the best student, first in the class, never had a problem with a boyfriend and never brought anyone to home. I strived in trying to be the perfect daughter. And then she says in my face, "I don't need a daughter."
Wow.
And that's when I realized I couldn't help her. And then I started therapy. I started going to lawyers, doctors, and everything, trying to figure out what I could do for myself and what I could do for her. Every single doctor and every single lawyer that I spoke to, if you take a step to take over your mom's life, I would have
Hmm.
to ask for guardianship. But in order to ask for her guardianship, to declare that she wasn't under full control of her actions, I had to request the guardianship from my father because he was alive at that time, because she was married. So I couldn't block her without blocking him. And in order to block her and him, I would have to need consent of my brother, who is schizophrenic. He would never give me authorization. And then I would be 28 years old, shackled with 3 guardianships for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And the lawyers look at me in the eyes and said, do you want that?
So where is your family now?
My family's back in Brazil. My dad died in the first wave of COVID, but he didn't die of COVID. He died in October 2020. And my mom, once my dad died, I was able to get her guardianship.
So now, how did this experience turn into your book?
That's another interesting thing because my dad, he always told me the stories of his adventures working for the Brazilian state oil company. So he was a career professional there. He worked 35 years in Petrobras. He knew everything. And my earlier memories of it as him doing the taxes of the firm and me sitting on the floor drawing on top of spreadsheets while he was working overtime. So he used to tell me the people he met, the people he visited, we would travel with him to meet other places and talk to other people. And he asked me to write the stories. After he retired, we would sit down for breakfast and he would recite the stories and tell me who he met and everything. And he told me, just write these stories because I have no chance of telling my stories, but you can write and make a book of it later on. I said, yeah, Dad, I will. It was kind of our thing. We would sit down, have cake, coffee, and then we would talk about the stories. He asked me to write the stories and publish after he died. And back in 2017, I clearly remember I was sick at home. I was already living in Germany. And then I had an idea, hey, if I start like this, I can make it work. And that's when I started writing. And I spent the next 5 years writing. The last time I saw my dad, it was Christmas 2019. And I went to Dad and said, Dad, I'm not finished yet, but I only need 5 more chapters. And I spent that Christmas and New Year's, and then it came back in January 2020. And by March, we officially went into lockdown. And then he was dead by October.
So he never got to read your book.
No, he never got to read my book.
Wow. It's like I'm just reeling from how you actually survived all of this.
That's when we go back to psychoanalysis. You cannot save the ones you love. You
Right.
can only love them.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you have to love them from afar.
the best part you can do is walk away. If you're at a table and you're not being served respect, it's very hard for you to stand up and walk away, especially if you're conditioned to stay in the table despite of all this respect you're being served.
So how much of this did you put into your book?
Everything.
But you fictionalized it.
Yeah. And that's the funny part. You have to read a book thinking which part is the real part and which part is the fiction. And my friends were reading and said, Kezia, I remember this conversation. I know this is real, but which part here is fiction? So, well, that's your job to figure out. There's a lot of people who are real people, and there are a lot of people who are real people, but their voice is an adaptation of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they were speaking things that I wish they would talk to me, but not necessarily the words that they actually exchanged to me.
So now, how long did it actually take you to write your book?
5 years. I started in 2017, and I finished the last chapter on the airport in Paris, on the boarding gate going to Brazil to declare my mom insane.
Wow, that's kind of poignant that you're finishing this book just as you're going back there for that.
Yes. I literally had a computer on because that's how I process emotion. I write, and then I had to do something, otherwise I would go crazy. And then I opened the laptop, and then I just went. And from the moment I clicked and wrote the end, they were calling us to board the gate.
Wow. So how long after you finished that you actually got it published?
I queried that for around 1 year. I had some people interested on it, but nothing really positive. But I knew that it was something that had to go out because it's very contemporary. And then I met a writing group online, and I started joining them, and I started getting coaching to query letters and everything. And one of the leaders there said, hey, send me the query letter and you can query my editor. without an agent. And if they like it, they're going to publish. And that's how I came to be published by Yokioto.
And this came out in
In August 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sent my query letter at end of July 2022. And 1 week later, they already sent me the contract. They already said, hey,
Wow.
we're going to publish.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, that's really when I thought, okay, so this is going to happen. And then we spent the next 6 months working on the details of layout and covers. And then it was published before Christmas 2022. And then I have been trying to put Kintsugi, presenting it. I've been to the Frankfurt Buchmesse, which is the big book fair here in Frankfurt. I published book 2, which is the continuation. Kintsugi came in December 2022. Mikano Mino Sakura came in July 2023, which is the continuation. And then in October, I presented in the Frankfurt Buchmesse. This week, I'm going to the Salon du Livre in Genève, and I'm going to present there. The following week, I'm going to the London Book Fair.
Oh, nice.
And in the end of the month, I'm going to the Leipzig Buchmesse. So I'm trying to bring the word out. But I'm active in TikTok. I'm active in Instagram. I'm trying to bring the book out because I feel like everybody who has a toxic family, but they don't know how, or they don't know if they can get out. And I just want to give the word that yes, you can. I did, and I survived.
That's really heartbreaking that you have to go so far away for your own mental health.
Yes. Because I'm fully aware that I have said I might not be talking to you today because it was that bad. There is a book which I use as a reference, Dire Emotions and Little Behaviors by Charles T. Stewart. He's a psychoanalyst from the United States. And actually, he's mentioned in one of my books. And I actually contacted their editors asking authorization to cite their words in my book. Because I not only write the fiction, but I write also the psychoanalysis behind of it.
So how do you feel where you are now in your process?
I feel much better. Therapy has been such an integral part of my life for the last couple of years. And now I can talk to you without crying. And I can interact with people without having the trigger, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall apart. I still have some things that I have to work, but I have the memory. I don't have the emotional content associated to the memory. It doesn't slap me in the face every time I think of them.
Yeah.
And that's a sign I'm healing.
So, and I think this is a good time to try and lighten up the conversation a little bit. Yeah. This is when we usually do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick. Okay. But, we're going to keep doing it until we figure out how to do it right.
Okay.
So question 1. What is your favorite travel destination?
Oh gosh, I love traveling. That's so difficult. I love Switzerland. I love France. Been many times to France. I haven't explored that as much as I want. I love Portugal. It's hard to choose. I actually love Germany. I have many places in my list that I like traveling and visiting. And oh gosh, I cannot choose. I really, really, really love Switzerland. I love Greece. Yeah, I love Switzerland. Yeah. It's between Greece and Switzerland. I cannot decide. Let's just
okay. We'll go with the 2. We'll go with the tie.
Yeah.
Question 2. What is your go-to activity when you think you need some self-care?
Oh gosh, self-care. I travel.
That's
I literally, yeah. Whenever I feel like, oh, I need to walk away or do something. I'm the kind of person that it's Friday night. I book a ticket for 2 a.m. in the morning, and then I wake up somewhere else. I go to Deutsche Bahn and check where can I wake up tomorrow morning.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and then I go for the weekend.
That's good.
Yeah.
Question 3. What do you find the hardest about being an expat?
The knowledge that I'm never going to be seen or respected as a native.
Yeah.
Regardless of how well I speak the language, how respectful I am towards the culture, how integrated I am and how respectable I am towards the culture and everything. I know and I'm fully aware I'm not going to ever be seen as a weakle.
Mm-hmm.
Has gotten better because now I speak German and then I interact and I work with Germans and everything, but I still feel like there are certain things that I might never get to do. And I think that's the hardest part. But Germany is not the hardest country I've ever lived. So I honestly think that from everywhere I've lived, and also that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with the country, despite all the difficulties. I look around and I said, hey, I'm home. I can make home here.
Yeah. So question 4, what is your favorite thing about living in Germany?
The fact that I can wake up anywhere. I can take a train or flight or whatever. We're smack in the middle of Europe and I can wake up anywhere.
Yeah.
So I like the centrality and I like the fact that in 3 hours I can be in Amsterdam, I can be in Paris, I can be in Zurich. Yeah, I can say, okay, I'm going to London tomorrow. It's 45 minutes away.
Yeah, that is a great thing. I love that about here.
Yeah.
And especially with having an international airport
Yes.
so close. I mean, you don't have to do all of these little tiny connecting flights. Because I'm from Kansas. There are very few direct flights from Kansas to anywhere. So question 5, name one thing that is still on your bucket list that you're dying to do.
Oh, okay. I want to turn Kintsugi into a series. I'm working with the writing group that helped me plan and publish. We're doing script writing classes, and the person who guides the group, he's already a script writer. And I have already Spotify lists. I have a list of characters. I have the draft of Steve the Bible, but I really want to make Kintsugi a series. The way the structure of the books are defined is to make episodes, and I really want to make it with an international cast in 3 different countries, speaking 4 different languages in the series, where people who are English really sounds like English people, who are German, they really are German, and who are Brazilian are really Brazilians. And I really, really, really want to show everyone in the world that Brazil is not only samba, carnival, and Pelé. We have a very rich culture that is hidden behind this carnival wall. And I really, really want to present Brazilian culture in a way that is not, hey, we only have Brazilian crazy ladies dancing on top of tables.
Yeah. So now give us the names of your books again.
Okay. It's a series planned of 7 books at the moment. Book 1 is called Kintsugi. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of fixing porcelain with gold. It's literally every single title is a metaphor of what happens in the book. So the first one is Kintsugi. The second one is, okay, deep breath, Mikano Mino Sakura. Mikano Mino Sakura is a Japanese word, very specific. The Japanese language has over 80 different words to specify the cherry season. And one of them is Mikano Mino Sakura. Mikano Mino Sakura is the period between the blossoming of the cherry trees until the moment the flowers fall to the floor. It's a change that happens fast and you cannot stop it. And that's book 2. And I'm working currently on book 3, which is Ikigai. Ikigai is a philosophy in Japan. The actual translation is finding the reason why you wake up in the morning. Book 1 and book 2 are already available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere where you have online books, which you can always find in www.keziakos.com.
And there will be live links in the magazine issue that you will appear in, which will be the April-May issue. So there'll be live links that they can click in the magazine. And of course, as always, in the description of the podcast. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for being on my podcast with me.
My pleasure.
And there you have it, my happy people, my interview with author Kezia Kos. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there wondering which role that they play in their own family dynamics right now. If you want to find out more, you can always search the internet for family dynamic roles and see where you fit in your own family. Now, the things that have been going on behind the scenes at Burkhart Books. Well, when I first started out doing my book series, the Into the West Saga serial, as Stephen Burkhart, I really wasn't trying to make a lot of sales and become a known author. I was doing it as a practice to see if I could even do it anymore. And whenever things started to get some attention, I started having book sales, I kept just piecing things together, doing a social media page here, building a website there, buying a domain somewhere else, getting business email somewhere else. So I had all of these little bits and pieces that kept coming together to build the business overall. But I had so many different service subscriptions in so many different places. So it was very hard to keep up with as my business actually turned into a business and began to grow. So this last week, I've been working very hard to try and consolidate everything down into just one or two places that I'm working with. And if you find that you can't email me for a day or two, or that you can't get to the website for a day or two, don't worry, you can still listen to the podcast through any streaming service, because the podcast goes through our service provider, Buzzsprouts. So it's bookbanter.buzzsprout.com. So you can always listen to it through that. But just in case we have any disruption, I am switching my domain from where I had bought it to Wix, where I actually host my website. We've moved all of our business email from where it was being hosted to Google Workspace, and we're just trying to bring everything together in just one or two service plans. So if you have trouble connecting with any of our stuff this week, don't worry, everything should all be sorted out by next Monday, and we will be streamlined from then on. But it has been a lot of time working with tech support in various places all week long. So yeah, I'm ready for the weekend. I'm ready for a break. And I have got a couple of fantastic books that I need to finish reading, and that will give me a nice break from just everything that I've had to be dealing with this week. But it's going to be so much better going forward. Now, don't forget, I'm working on the next issue of Book Banter magazine, which is going to drop on June 1st, and it's going to be our summer read spectacular. We've got all kinds of fantastic authors, from children's picture and activity books all the way to adult fiction reads. We've got cozy mystery, we've got westerns, we've got books for kids, young adults, and adults. I mean, there's just going to be something in here for everyone, so be sure to check it out. But for now, I think it's time for you all to go forth and be really happy.